He's sound asleep! How dare he!
There was a recent Dragon Ball poll that came out on the channel that asked you, who is your favorite Majin Buu? And as you can see on the results right here, Super Buu won with an overwhelming advantage. And in today's video, we will make an argument as to why Kid Buu is the best Buu, and we also must accept that we're arguing from a position of a disadvantage, because since Kid Buu is the least cognitive out of all Buu forms, this is going to be a rather hard argument. But I promise you that we will make a strong argument, and we also have to thank Jaxblade because the majority of the points that will be made in this video are essentially his, with my voice essentially narrating and editing them. So, where do we begin as to why Kid Buu is a God Tier villain? Well, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to compare him to the other main villains of Dragon Ball Z. And that, of course, is Vegeta, Frieza, and Cell. Now, when you think about it, Vegeta is essentially a space bandit with less ambitions than Frieza, who is a space emperor, and then when you look at a character like Cell, he's essentially just an evil Goku that wanted to get revenge on behalf of the Red Ribbon Army, and essentially caused his own downfall with his own Saiyan genetics that wanted him to prove himself to the utmost abilities. So when you compare Buu to all of this, Kid Buu specifically, out of all of the Buu forms, is truly the embodiment of chaos. When you compare him to Fat Buu, who's essentially just a naughty child, when you compare him to Evil Buu, who's kinda like Kid Buu, but just not to the same exact extent when it comes to his unpredictability, and then when you compare him to Super Buu, who's this weird pseudo-limbo villain where he has evil ambitions more than the other Buus because he's the most intelligent, but at the same time, even after absorbing Gohan and Piccolo, there's nothing really unique about him as a villain, as he basically just uses the exact same attacks that our heroes do, with Majin Buu qualities. So as a result of that, none of the other Buu forms are truly unique, but when you look at Kid Buu, because he is more instinctive and more chaotic, he truly is the most Janemba-like out of all of the Dragon Ball villains that were Majin Buu. And if we were to pinpoint one direct action that illustrated how chaotic Kid Buu is, it would be his decision to blow up the Earth. Why not? Why do all other previous Dragon Ball villains decide to just keep the Earth around when I can just blow it up and see what you do after, and destroy the planet just because? Kid Buu is like an evil psycho child versus a naughty child that didn't know any better when you compare him to Fat Buu. And you can see this clearly as Kid Buu got a sadistic pleasure in causing harm, whereas Fat Buu is just simply being naughty because he was told to. So, when you combine that and the fact that Evil Buu was like this too, but he was barely in the series, this obviously gives a stronger argument to Kid Buu simply because he was fleshed out more than Evil Buu, who's just barely in the show, who was basically just created to create Super Buu. Now, one thing that we touched on briefly, but we also have to go more in depth on, is the level of unpredictability. He really had fights in Dragon Ball that were simply like no other. And when you go back and you look at the fights that Kid Buu was involved with, the animators were extremely creative in how they used his powers. In the way that he was manipulating his limbs, specifically how he would go underground to try and attack Goku, how our characters would blast him, but then he would stretch his body around to go back and attack immediately. And as a result of it, out of all of the Majin Buu forms, he by far had the most unique fighting style because he also retained some of the other Buu qualities like the ability to turn people into candy and such, but did it in his own sadistic Kid Buu way. Now, something else that we also touched on before, which makes Kid Buu truly unique, is the fact that he is a controlled rage monster, similar to the character of Janemba. Now, we've obviously had rage monsters before, like Max Cell and Hirudegarn, but what made Kid Buu unique is that he fought in a specific way where he was a beautiful balance between conventional fighting and also combining that with chaos. Instead of these huge kaiju-like monsters where you basically just fly around them and try to attack in a very unconventional way, you can fight Kid Buu the way that you could fight a conventional character with your traditional punches and kicks and energy blasts, but then you also have to factor in that his unpredictability and his unconventional fighting style mixed with fighting on a conventional level simply just made the fights very different from anything else that we really had in Dragon Ball. And when you look at Kid Buu specifically, there were many times where when he was fighting, he didn't seem angry at all. He was having fun, enjoying the battles like a child, instead of other rage monsters that are just simply angry because their existence forces them to. And I think because Kid Buu was not a traditional rage monster, but also had rage monster-like qualities combined with mixing in conventional and unconventional fighting styles as we saw, definitely made him a unique villain in that own right too. Now, we also have to get into another major part when it comes to Kid Buu. He is a very, very, very funny villain, and humor is a huge part as to why Kid Buu is so cool. Now, the only time that we really saw Kid Buu get serious was when he had to basically fight off the Spirit Bomb, as that's really the only time that you saw him really going all out and he was truly focused on something. But when you go back to the earlier parts of his fights, it was very hard to know if Kid Buu was ever serious the entire time that he was fighting our characters, and that made him very unpredictable. You can never know what to expect because Goku thought that he could defeat Kid Buu if he fully powered up in Super Saiyan 3, but is Goku really sure of that? Did Kid Buu had hidden depths to his power that we never got to see simply because he was just having fun and he was fighting down to the level of his opposition just for his own weird, uncontrollable entertainment? And the thing is that unlike Fat Buu, when you look at Kid Buu specifically, he truly felt like an actual evil demon that you had to take seriously, whereas when you look at Fat Buu and the abilities that he had and his ambitions and the way he spoke, it's very hard to take Fat Buu seriously at all, even if he was a threat at the particular time that he was in Dragon Ball. And that's what made Kid Buu so different when he was fighting against Goku, Vegeta, and even Mr. Satan. You know, you would see Mr. Satan engaging with Kid Buu, and Kid Buu would just simply be having fun with him and just teasing him, essentially, where in fact Kid Buu could easily have killed Mr. Satan at any particular point. And it is scenes like that where you see Kid Buu fighting against these different characters in totally different ways that added a lot of humor to his actual Dragon Ball fights. I mean, let's just take moments where Kid Buu would be randomly fighting Goku and Vegeta, and then in just the blink of an eye, he's just dancing and having fun. That's just something that you never saw with any of the other Boos, and that's not to say that the other Boos didn't have comical moments, like for example, when you look at the manga and the anime, where Super Buu took a quick break to, enjoy a drink while Gotenks was in the Room of Spirit and Time. Those moments were definitely fun, but definitely over the top. The level of humor that Kid Buu introduced into Dragon Ball simply felt a lot more low-key, and it felt a lot more natural within the scenes that they were having instead of being too forced to be a comical moment. And I feel like, as a result of that, one of the things that made Kid Buu more funny than anything else is simply when you look at how hard the characters were fighting against him, when it goes to Fat Buu and Goku and Vegeta, and even Mr. Satan when he was trying to help out in whatever limited way he can. All of the other characters were taking everything so seriously, while this whole entire fight for his life was essentially just a joke. And as a result of all of that, because the level of humor was more down to earth and not as forced with Kid Buu, made him the most humorous out of all of the Buu form. And to conclude our reasons for today, guys, the biggest reason why Kid Buu was the best Majin Buu is because he's the purest form of Buu. This is what Buu was meant to be. Before absorbing Kai's, before absorbing all of our characters and essentially just stealing their power, this was what Buu was. This is the original source of it, and regardless of what you want to say about power scaling, because there were debates back in the day of, is Kid Buu the strongest Buu, is Buuhan the strongest Buu, all of that. I mean, if you go back to the early 10s and even the 2000s, there were so many debates about how strong the Buu forms were, and that's completely irrelevant, because when you actually go back and you look at the moments, regardless of whatever specific power scaling you have about the Boos, what made Kid Buu so interesting is that even though he joked around and was having fun in the actual fights in his own childlike way, he fought all by himself. And as a result of that, we got a chance to see what a pure Buu, with no assistance from anybody, would be like in the Dragon Ball series. And as a result of that, it made Kid Buu feel so fresh and original compared to the other Boos that essentially just copied what our characters could do and just borrowed their essence from others. And as a result of all of that, that is why Kid Buu is a God tier villain.